Thank you so much for being here, Shannon. I appreciate you taking time away from your job to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, I want to talk with you. I was talking with a friend, our mutual friend in Texas, about caregivers and the roles of family, and she suggested that I talk to you. And I wanted to do a show about it because it is something that I hang around a lot with 65 and older, some of my closest friends now, because I hang out with my mom a lot and I play cards with the ladies and golf with the ladies. And I hear these conversations regularly about their aging parents, or even them maybe going from being at cards one week to one of the ladies was now in a senior living home. So it happens fast and we're rarely prepared, but sometimes there are things we can do to prepare. So thank you for being here to hopefully clarify for the person watching what to expect for their aging parent or loved one.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's first start with your role. You were a caregiver for two different people for 4 years, but what led you first, before we go into that, to have that kind of a role? It takes a special kind of person to take on that responsibility. And really, I'm guessing it feels like an honor to get to see them through to the end of their life at that stage.
It is. Throughout high school and secondary education, my focus was early childhood education, but I've always found myself drawn to those in need. Um, from the time I was 9, I was giving mixing insulin and giving diabetic injections to my grandmother because that was part of the need in our family network. We were all close together, and when we were with her, we had to know how to be able to help her medically when there was not another adult around. And I think I just kind of have always felt drawn to that. Had a whole lot of younger siblings. So I found myself from the beginning of my life, basically,
Yeah,
drawn to a caregiving role.
even that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Even that is a tail sign, because when I was going through chemo and I had to have shots every day for my white count, my mom couldn't give them to me. Like if my husband was gone, I had to do it myself because she just couldn't do it. And some people just, whether it's needles or just certain things, are harder, especially the more, maybe the closer you are to a person or the more you're worried about them. But it definitely takes a certain person in the family to know their role in the care. So it was definitely evident for you from a young age.
Yes. And I found myself drawn when I was working in public schools. I had a soft spot for the special needs. So I became a special needs aide. And then when I left the school district and went into a bigger career, it was special needs adults.
Mhm.
And then my husband said, "Can you please get a job where you don't come home with bruises and black eyes and cry all the time? Find something less stressful, please, because I'm worried about your mental health
Yeah.
and your physical health." And so I went into the world of administration for probably 6 years, but I felt like something was missing.
Mhm.
I excelled at what I did, but something was missing.
And so, how did you answer the call to care for these two particular people? What were their first names so we can talk about them by name?
So Beth and Marie.
Okay. So, how did you
And
come to find them, or did their families find you?
their families found me. So I was working through an agency, just doing kind of errand running with clients, ones who needed more of a just a sitter for family respite because the family were the primary caregivers and they needed a break or they had an appointment and mom had an appointment the same day. Um, and then, I found a passion for what I was doing there. And there were a couple of families in my area who had heard about me word of mouth from another family. And so they asked if I would be interested in taking on a more long term role with their family members. Beth didn't have any children. She didn't have a spouse, and her siblings are all aging as well. So
Mm.
that family needed someone for her um, a little more. And then my other client, Marie, was more of a taking her shopping and to get her nails done and her hair done and take her to doctor's appointments. But it was more of a fun, just getting her
Companionship.
out of the house.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and then, you know, gradually their care needs increased and um, they both ended up passing away. But it's I know it's difficult for the family when there's no children to be able to fall back on to take care of an aging parent,
Mhm.
um, and all the siblings are aging as well. And then with Marie's family, the son was battling his own battles with cancer, so he wasn't able to be the caregiver that was needed for his mom. Um,
There's so many dynamics that go into it. Let's take a break. And when we come back, let's talk about some of that, like what the day to day was like,
sure.
what role you filled. And also for people watching, they might think it's all or nothing. Like either have a caregiver or you're doing it all yourself. And I know from when my mom was ill and needed support, that there are options for someone to come in for even a couple hours a week. So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more with you. Shannon, we're talking with you about your role as a caregiver. You took on a long-term or full-time role with both Beth and Marie. The families found you by word of mouth, and what started out as companionship for one of them, taking her to appointments and things, became more of a full-time position and really getting them through end of life. And I want people who are watching to know their options if they are even now navigating their aging parent or another family member or loved one, that it isn't just all or nothing. People think, oh, I can't afford a caregiver. I can't afford full time. I can't do, there's so many obstacles to overcome. But really, people can benefit from just a few hours a week of support to get that respite you're talking about so they can go to their own appointments and not have to worry about a loved one at home or taking them everywhere they go when maybe they are better off not doing those travels or errands, things like that. And
Correct.
so tell me a bit about your day to day. So it started out, like you said, taking one to nail appointments and things like that. But then both Marie and Beth had increasing needs. So how did you manage taking care of both of them in that capacity when you had two and there's only so many hours in the week?
Um, One of the fortunate things that my admin experience helped with was scheduling,
Mhm.
because I was both of their primary caregivers. The families allowed me the control to do the scheduling of their doctor's appointments and all of the other things that were necessary. So I was able to have a set calendar and work Beth's appointments around Marie's and Marie's around Beth's. And in the beginning, it was easier because Marie was more of a companionship versus medical necessities. And then, you know, it slowly transitioned over a little bit. And some of my time with Marie had to diminish a little bit because Beth needed longer care, more hours of care. And so family had to either come in to be my respite when I needed just a break from it all, because caregiver burnout,
Mhm.
I get emotional.
Mhm.
For families or caregivers, the burnout is real.
Mhm.
And you don't want to ever take out your stress and frustrations on the person that you're caring
Mhm.
for because they depend on you. But if you don't have a break and some way to step away, um, it really takes a toll on you and affects your ability to be a quality caregiver to the people that you love.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I've been a caregiver and I've been the one receiving care. And I think caregiving is the tougher job. Somebody else might have a different opinion if they've been both sick and a caregiver. But I think that there's worry, concern, there's responsibility, there's medications, there's, in my husband's case, there were medications that there was a medication we had to mix and administer every night at 9 o'clock. And if I got it wrong, he could die. I mean, it was just really, we had to get trained on it. It was a huge responsibility. And, meanwhile, life is still happening. Some of these family members still have young kids that they're raising. Some are facing, like you said, illnesses and challenges themselves. And so having someone like you that is that they can call upon is, significant. And I think sometimes, there is an expectation, and I hear this conversation amongst my mom and her friends that most of them are in their 70s, some of them mid to late 70s. And I hear the conversation I have is they don't want their kids taking care of them. They'd rather live in assisted living at some point, things like that. Or there's the expectation, like different families want to make different decisions about what the family or the children's role will be. And I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. I think a lot of times the assumption is, well, they took care of us when we were kids, so we're going to take care of them. And I absolutely feel that way for my family dynamic, but it wouldn't be the case necessarily, maybe for my brother who still has a child who's 12 years old, from kids ranging from 12 to 20. And my son is grown, and, my responsibilities in life are different. So I don't think there can be judgment, but I think sometimes there's guilt
Yes.
in figuring
And
out what your role is.
one of the things that I noticed is, for some who had family that were involved, it's harder because there's the intimacy that you don't think about with bathing and toileting.
Mm-hmm.
And, for a daughter to help her mother is one thing, but for it to be a son who needs to bathe and wash his mother, it's an uncomfortable, it's a natural thing that we do. We think about, when we bathed our babies, the gender didn't matter. We just were cleaning and caring for the ones we love. But that kind of, as you get older, that dynamic changes. And
Sure.
so I know that's a struggle, and a reason that they do feel guilty, but they just don't have that comfort level to be able to, either the person who needs the care doesn't have the comfort level for their child to see them nude, or the adult child is trying to respect the privacy and the dignity of the parent, but it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think about too the responsibility that goes into just coordinating care and communication. If we talk about communication that happens with in a doctor patient setting. So as our patients get older, I think it's true, even maybe sometimes no matter what age, depending on what you're facing, it's always good to have a second person in the room in a doctor's appointment to remember the things you forgot. And especially if there's something critical going on, there's some kind of treatment decisions and these kinds of things. And so did you take that role as well? If you're taking them to appointments, then it's your job then to communicate to the family. So there's 3 different chains of communication, and a lot can get lost along the way.
Absolutely. And one of the key things that I advocate for, in whether you're a caregiver, a hired caregiver, or a family caregiver, record the conversations, because even when you're writing down notes, you're distracted and you're trying to think. You can legally record the conversations with your doctor. You just need to tell them ahead of time, we need to record this conversation so that we don't have any misunderstandings when this information gets passed on to the family, or if we need to look back at what options are being listed. We don't want to have any confusion or questions. So we would like to record this conversation.
Is that true just in Texas, or is that a federal or a state decided law? I wonder.
That's a good question, because I know
even still some doctors, I've heard stories that they've not allowed that. I mean, it's a good option to ask. And I think with the right provider, they'd be like, absolutely record it so that they want the best for the patient. But I know there's some doctors who'd be like, they don't want the liability.
Because they don't want to be quoted on something if they made a mistake. But, and if they say absolutely not, you have the option to write it down. But it's important to get the facts down, either on paper or on recording, so that you can transfer that information to the parent, so that you are the family, or even the client that you're caring for, if they're being told that their disease has progressed from stage 2 to stage 4, or that they've run out of treatment options, it's an overwhelming, and the diagnosis hits the ears, and then the brain just goes into a million other directions. And you want to make sure that you're being, for them, that you're being their ears and their brain, and getting all the information you can for them to be able to digest at a later date.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we
And there
even
are
have,
actually apps that help with that too. I mean, I use it in my own business where, of course, I let my client know I'm recording the conversation, and then I'll plug it into one of the apps that I use that I have trained to take the notes and disseminate it the way that I need to hear it, where I want to make sure that it's like, tell me like next steps that I need to do, organize this in terms of medications, organize this in terms of diagnosis. And then those notes are there, and you can provide them. It's not even just your memory of the notes or the conversation. You have apps that can actually disseminate and organize that information, maybe even more than you can, especially if you're facing the stress of, a new diagnosis, or, some of the things that happen in a healthcare setting, in a doctor's office. So there's a lot of tools that are available. And I think it's important for people to use whatever style works for them. Some people would not be comfortable using apps. Maybe they've never used them, but there's other ways to make sure that that communication is strong.
absolutely. We've even done a call-in where the family can't be there because they have other commitments, but they can step away for 15 minutes and everybody's on a conference call. Yes. So we have me in person in the office with the client, and the brother and the sister are both on the phone call listening to everything the doctor's saying, and I'm writing down questions that they have and answers. And but communication all the way around is the most important, because if a family member just assumes that that's going to be done by the caregiver, some doctor's offices won't allow it unless the family gives permission.
Yeah. HIPAA and all of the things. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Making sure that you're on their HIPAA release.
Yes.
HIPAA gives you permission to not only be at the appointments, but to call for prescriptions and to inquire about care and to get calls back. And that is definitely one step that needs to be added to the list.
Absolutely.
Let's take a break, and we'll finish up when we come back. Just a moment more. Thanks, Shannon. Shannon, the last part I want to talk about is just conflict resolution. I'm sure that you were in the middle of some of these things. I know that, so Beth had a son, right? Or Marie had one son.
Yes.
And Beth had siblings that were involved. So,
correct.
I think that what happens in conflict, in stress situations, I think we are who we are times like 10. If we're, if we're the person in the family who's helpful and shows up and does all the things, then we're going to be that person. If we're the person who just tells everyone else what to do and doesn't really show up at all, we're going to be that person. And there's all different roles that we have in our family, but I think the dynamic becomes even more obvious and pronounced. And so when you observe these types of things as a caregiver, or even as somebody watching saying, okay, well, this is a difficult situation between myself and my siblings, or we want this thing, or the other part of the family doesn't. What's the best course of action for that, to waste the least amount of time on things like that just get in the way of the care and the end of life experience, or that season in life where that person you're caring for doesn't want any conflict? Maybe sometimes that person can be the one causing the conflict, but let's just assume they're not.
Absolutely. And I've experienced that all the way around. So when we would have issues with conflict because the siblings, for Beth, for example, the siblings are a little more removed. So they didn't see the decline in her ability to pay her bills on time. And so she would have me start making sure, pull in her mail, go through her mail, sort out the bills, put the dates on them, write the checks, and she would sign them and I would mail them. And And then,
So it requires a lot of trust on,
it does.
her.
Absolutely. And so when it got to that stage, and I was trying to explain to the family her increasing needs and that some uh, financial oversight needs to be there, some kind of check and balance for her, other than myself, because she had been the victim of a scam,
Yeah.
an internet scam. So there has to be a point where, like, called a family meeting. Everybody found a time in their calendar, and we all came to Beth's house and met where it was the most comfortable for her.
Yes, sir.
But it's also awkward because they feel like they're being, as their mindset declines, they feel like a child in trouble or being admonished by everyone. And that's not the case. But you have to have a plan. And each person that's going to be involved in the meeting can come up with their list of things that they think should be addressed, or and so that's what I would do, is make a list of things that need to be addressed, and then the family would decide, okay, you're going to be in charge of her finances, or overseeing. Shannon can write the bills and do this, but you need to be the one to double check the bank accounts and the credit cards.
Delegation. And again, I think it comes down to the roles in the family, right? That excuse me, that delegation was based on the roles that those children have had in their, or siblings have had in their family for generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's very helpful to have these conversations and for people listening to think about the options. And it is something that is hard to prepare for, but if you don't prepare for it, it's even harder.
Absolutely.
So having those conversations and organizing and deciding who's in charge of what. Now there's always room for flexibility, but when your loved one goes in the hospital for something and then they come home and they say, well, they won't be able to take care of themselves, at least in the near future, maybe it's not even permanent. But if you don't have that in place, it adds stress to an already stressful situation. So having an idea, is it going to be a personal caregiver who comes in the home? Is there funds allocated for a facility? What kind of programs are there available to make sure that a facility is an option? I know sometimes there's wait lists and people think, oh, it's 2-year wait list. Well, the 2 years go by anyway. So, getting on those wait lists when the time comes, all of those things are really important things to consider. So I thank you for being here to help us clarify a little bit what the options are. And then also just hope and pray that people find someone like you that they can trust to be part of their loved one's care, especially at end of life. Thank you for being here.
The conversation should happen well before the need.
Yeah. Well, we're having it now, so hopefully people are listening and can address that in their own families. Thanks for being here, Shannon.
Thank you for having me.